Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Hi. I'm here. Everything feels weird. Something's not right. Strange day. I was just really busy. I honestly did not intend to, but I did sort of manage to avoid a lot of news and information absorption through the day, which is probably good. That's not true when I think about it, even as I did try to avoid it a little bit because it's just so depressing. But I couldn't avoid it because people kept sending me stuff. If it wasn't a link to a video or a link to a story, I'm bombarded with the stuff all day, which I appreciate. I appreciate people sending me material. It keeps me abreast of developing stories all day long and through the night. But if it wasn't that, it was people messaging me, trying to sway my views, influence my opinion on this issue or that issue. Today, what are the issues? The issues today are Israel planning a ground offensive in Lebanon, questions about Ukraine and whether there will be any support there after the election in November, and what will happen to the country. And does anybody even care anymore? And see, that's the thing. It's not that I notice this isolationist attitude out there. It's more than that. It's like there's something seriously wrong with the country, Canada and the United States. People have lost that spark, the pride in their nation, the self-respect that every human being should have. Today is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. No pride in that. Where's the truth? There was a news conference held in Ottawa today talking about just that. The people at the podium say they're searching for truth and they want more money to do it. I guess we'll talk about it a little bit tonight. But something feels off. Everything feels off. I guess it's because we're in the fog of war. I don't know. But there's definitely something wrong. I think you can all feel it too. I keep waiting for things to get back to normal. How many years has it been now? 4? I can't keep track. I sure miss the before times. Maybe what we had, what we thought was normal, wasn't. Maybe this is it. Maybe we were just spoiled. I don't know. How would I know? I've never had to live through the kind of adversity that other people have had to live through in war zones. But we are at war, aren't we? Yes, we are. We'll talk about all these stories tonight, I guess, on some level or another. The election, too, to some degree. I'll try to cover all the bases. Honestly, the way today went, there was a lot less formality in my preparations today. I've just got a lot of stuff in my head. I'll share it with you. If you stick around. Maybe we'll open the phone lines. Maybe you guys can weigh in tonight too. You have stuff in your head? Stuff you want to share? Hit me with your best shot. Share. Let's talk, I guess. Everything with Trump feels weird right now, too. It's different. You know it. I know it. Everybody can feel it. It's not like it was the first time he was elected. Everything feels, and I hate to use the word, weird.
He's a fighter. He's a survivor. President Trump, defiant, strong. He is determined to make America great again. Pay tribute to the 45th President of the United States with this collectible t-shirt from the Maverick News Memorable Moments collection. Even a would-be assassin's bullet could not stop him. Instead, he emerged with his fist in the air ready to fight. For freedom. Get your Trump Fighting for Freedom t-shirt with any donation of $30 or more to Maverick News. There are 2 iconic artistic designs to choose from. But there is only one way to get these. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Support free speech. Free media. Support Maverick News. Call 1-866-248-1490 or order online at supergeeks.tv.
Okay, here I am. If you want to call into the show, you can do that at 1-519-401-1373. And I was late setting the program up tonight, so the audience is building. People are finding us. We'll get more people on board as the program progresses. And if you want to join the conversation, this is how you do it. Okay, Mavericks, it's call-in time. Join the conversation. Call now, 1-519-401-1373. One 519-401-1373. Exercise your right to free speech. That's 1-519-401-1373. That's 1-519-401-1373. Maverick News. Call now. The world is watching and listening to you. Okay, we have our first caller of the night on the line, and it's the one, the only. Dragon, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Maverick and Rick?
Well, I'm hanging in there. I hope everybody can hear you okay. I'm going to crank that a little bit more so that the audio is okay. I'll check the chat. If you guys are having any audio issues, you let me know in the chat, and I'll try to correct things. So, welcome to tonight's call-in program. What is on your mind, Dragon from Montreal?
Well, with what I've seen for the last days since the 27th in Lebanon and, Beirut and all the mayhem that is going on there, and also in Montreal, things are not looking good. It's frustrating, I think, and also that we're on the verge of a World War III, I think, because we're pretty much getting ready toward it, military speaking.
So what has been happening in Montreal? Are you seeing a lot of demonstrations, protests?
Yeah, well, Saturday there were a rally at the Embassy of America in Montreal. So yeah, it was fun. At the embassy, everything was. It was clearly, I would say, peaceful, but the rhetoric was angry and a lot of calls for revolution. So yeah.
Calls for a revolution? You mean a revolution here in Canada?
Yeah, revolution everywhere, and mostly in Canada. They would like to see that. They call for Hamas. They call for other terrorist groups and such. So it's kind of frustrating to see that in our city and our street, I think.
Yeah.
Every week.
Every week? Yeah. Almost. Well, actually, almost. There's a demonstration someplace every day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Saturday is like their favorite day to make some statements and go on rally and start, gathering on some strategic points and start the rally from there and go to a strategic location and, stay there a few hours and chant their thing and call everyone racist or terrorist like you and I, stuff like that. So, yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're not part of it.
Yeah, well, I know that tonight Israel is planning a limited ground operation into southern Lebanon. It could begin anytime, imminent. That's the word used by U.S. officials tonight. So, and
about that, actually, just about that, I was listening to another news outlet on the tubes before you get on, around probably 5 to 10 minutes before you went on live, and it was told that they were starting actually the ground invasion,
right,
or the tactical invasion a few moments ago. So it's breaking.
Yeah. So you know what I had people message me today and they're like, Israel's just attacking Lebanon for no reason. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the 8,000 rockets that were launched at Israel since October 7th. The attacks on civilians in just on the other side of the Israel-Lebanon border, that from Hezbollah, that doesn't count, I guess. I'm having a little trouble understanding the way people are perceiving this, but maybe I'm the one missing something. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that, Israel is just retaliating from what happened. And, I'm kind of inclined to say that they are just defending themselves at the point that we are now. And another statement, it was, I think, Tuesday 26th, where Netanyahu was at the UN and made a statement, right?
Yeah.
Right before they have level 6 building on the 27th, kind of few hours just before that. Well, people around the web were, and probably even yourself, thought that it was more of a, such a sort of a message, right? But to me, the way I kind of analyzed the message that it was stated from Netanyahu, it was basically like a warning of what was to come. When he said something about that we need to eradicate the Hezbollah problem and something along these lines.
And did you
before the Beirut attack?
And did you see all the diplomats from all those different countries get up and walk out on him?
Yeah. So to me, it was a message that, it felt to me like between the lines, basically he was saying, I'm going to attack whatever the cost, and we're going just to go all in. So, but it was kind of between the lines.
And to me,
it was not punched into.
When I saw the video of all those diplomats just walking out, I kind of shrugged my shoulders and I thought, yeah, that's the way the world is these days. It's most of the world stacked up against the Jews again. Like we've seen this happen in history before. And am I surprised? Not really. The majority of countries represented at the United Nations are anti-American, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-this, anti-that, anti. And a lot of these countries, many, I don't know, are any of them not authoritarian? Are any of them not dictatorial? Or do any of them actually embrace freedom on any real level? The United Nations, and this is the thing too, I hear people on the one hand saying, oh, we need to disengage from the UN and the WHO and the WEF and these World Health Organization entities and blah, 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 blah. And then they turn around and say, well, look at what happened at the UN. It's, you see, that proves that Israel is wrong. Well, which way do you want it? Like, it's people kind of having their cake, eating it too, vanilla and chocolate at the same time, whatever they want. They just use the event of the day or the response from the UN one way or the other. If it's something people agree with, then they say, see, that's what the truth is. No, that's an opinion. These people walking out, that's politics. And you're seeing it in the street. You mentioned it. It's right in our faces. Dragon, you said it yourself just a moment ago. They're calling for a revolution. We are in the midst of an attempted revolution. There's a global revolution happening right now. You said we are on the verge of World War III. No, we are in World War III right now. It's right here in the country, in case anybody cares to open the other eye. I guess that's why everything feels weird. Yeah. We're into it.
The only thing that is left to go is basically rockets into our beautiful countries where we have probably never have seen them, never before. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of sad, but
You know what, man? Like that's why NATO issued that I guess that recommendation or warning a few days ago, telling NATO nations, including especially Canada, to prepare for the unthinkable, prepare for a larger war with Russia and these Axis nations. See, they've set up this what they're calling an axis of resistance, right? Well, it was this. That's what we had in World War II. It was the Allies, us and our allies, and the Axis. It was Allies and Axis. In fact, I think there's a board game out there called Axis and Allies, or Allies and Axis. I played it years and years and years ago. It's still out there. It's a real thing, man. It's like, and it's just playing out again right now. And yet I see people, and there's a question, Dragon, I think for everybody tonight is, do you love your country enough to actually stand up and fight for it? I wonder.
well, right now, I mean, physically speaking or health speaking, I'm probably not the best soldier out there. But thing is that I wouldn't fight the war if the case is not a good fight. You know what I mean? I mean, if it's I mean, in a way, I don't think it's still a war that is, how can I put that? I think we're still like putting ourselves into the ditch if we keep going into putting our nose into other people's stuff. The problem is that we are already into it. So would it be proper to me to get into a war or be a cannon folder? It's kind of sad, but we don't need that, I think. But we probably are going into that direction sooner than we think. So.
Well, you know, it's like if you know, when I was young. Well, I'll save that story for later. It just seems like what I see with people, and I think people have already given up, and we haven't even hardly gotten started. It's like people, and today is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, which is, you know, to mark the day of, you know, it's a day of, I don't know what you call it, mourning. Anyway, it's about residential schools and First Nations kids, and I mean, you all know the story, so that's what today is. But really, it's a day that I think is designed to make colonialist settlers, occupiers feel really, 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 really guilty for just being here. You know,
no, to me it's probably, well, no, probably not. To me it's just to forget the past, maybe, or forget what we have done wrong, and to do better tomorrow and today. You know?
I don't know.
But just forget.
I mean,
just forget the. You know, it's not about forgetting or rewriting the history. What I mean is, you embrace what you have done wrong or what your ancestor has done wrong, and reconnect with that. But at the same time, you know, you just reflect on that and go toward better action.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, you know, years ago, felt like, or seemed like we were working toward better things all the time, but this, I don't know how much truth we have out of all this. You know, like I saw like a video today, right, with a guy, because everybody's watching videos all the time, and this guy is like, well, if you have to question anything about these graves at schools, then you're just out, and I don't want you in my whatever, in my friends list or whatever it is. And then he said, because you think about it, what kind of school has graves at it? And I thought, well, what a dunce. I mean, the guy is clearly freaking stupid. The reason is a lot of schools have grave sites. Churches, schools, sometimes churches doubled as schools. Sometimes if you drive down the highway, there are grave sites on the side of the highway, really old ones. There are some just along here, and these graveyards on sites of schools. A lot of them were like community, like grave sites, not just for like.
Yep.
It's not like where they just buried all the children. A lot of those grave sites were community grave sites where you had First Nations peoples and settlers, if you want to call them that, from the local community buried in those community graveyards. Like I can drive around here and find grave sites at churches and in those kinds of locations, so lots of schools had grave sites and churches. So yeah, wake the hell up and educate yourself before you start making videos and spouting off. I'm so tired of people baking my brain with stupidity. Because it goes.
Yeah, well,
This is why everything's off. This is why it's weird. Because that's just a freaking guilt trip based on stupidity. I mean, it's like grave sites at a school. Yeah, they've been there like since the 1800s, 1700s, man. Like they've been there. So, and all kinds of people buried in there. I don't know, man. Like, again, if I'm wrong, I'm open to be corrected, but I don't think so because I drive by them and I see them. And
well, I can tell you that I know a few places in Longueuil and Montreal which in history there were some community, like you said, that, there were some graves somewhere around, but we needed to, some part of the land to build some stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of sad, but at the same time, I mean, we're a evolving community and society, so.
well, you mean like First Nations or Indigenous burial sites where things were built? You mean? Like,
Yeah,
because
yeah, but
anytime
I'm sure that in Longueuil or in Montreal there's a few, so
I mean,
I just have to do some research on the subject and I'll dig in.
yeah, but I mean, efforts are made all the time, like extensive efforts to ensure that grave sites are first identified and then not desecrated. So, we do go to great lengths to avoid those kinds of things. It's there are instances where things have gone sideways, sure, but like Oka and I can think of
I'm
bad
not saying
situations,
that
but
it's
I mean, come on.
something that it's not looked at. There's probably few sites that it is the case, but I mean I don't know, but we can probably sometime just look into it, make some research, and we'll see. We can dig some good info and probably some skeleton behind the behind the curtain, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so actually, there's a clip here. I've got there was this news conference held today in Ottawa. Let me see if I can find this one clip, though. I haven't actually had a moment to vet this. I'm going to watch this for the first time with you guys. This is just a short clip. I did watch more of this news conference right from the beginning, but this is a clip. And this is This is about the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. Who are these people talking? It's a residential schools survivors group and holding a news conference, and they want more money from the government to continue what they say is, their work to find truth, which is fine with me. If we actually get to truth, that's cool. But so far as I know, they've used this ground penetrating radar, which is always inconclusive. And they have not exhumed any graves or done any further excavation of any kind to confirm any of the, to find out exactly what's been going on at some of these sites that may be grave sites. In any case, let's look at this clip because apparently there's something significant about it. I'm not sure. Let's just see what it is.
Most Canadians think that Justin Trudeau is making an effort. I gather you don't feel what he's doing is worthwhile.
Well, have you seen how much teenagers are going missing?
How can he be blamed for that? I mean, you don't think that anything he's doing is helping the situation? Is he an improvement over Stephen Harper? I mean, what talk about his record? Is it?
Excuse me, did I just hear you correctly? How can he be blamed for that?
No.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Don't speak to us that way.
Stop right now. You do not speak to us that way. We are human beings. And the way that you're speaking to us
It's not acceptable.
you are not.
No, stop it. Stop it right now.
We don't want you here. Can you please leave?
Step out.
Step out.
Step out. Then I don't want to hear from you.
You have no right.
You don't speak to us like that.
Very simple question. Can I have an answer?
And this is the problem, the way you communicate.
I'm not insinuating anything.
No.
I'm looking for information.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm
not
going to
arguing
stop.
you.
No, stop. Stop. You need to stop.
I'm only
You need to
asking you-
stop. Stop. You want to shut us down. And you think you're privileged to disrespect us the moment we tell you because of your colonial mindset and your colonial way of being, your white privilege, your white fragility. You can't take our truth. Look how many people came to bat for you, white lady.
I guess you couldn't hear that, could you, Dragon, or did you?
Yeah, I did heard a bit of it. They look pretty angry.
Indeed, they are. Yep.
Yeah. Telling to the reporter to let her talk this way. I mean, it was kind of rude, maybe, or was he rude to?
I have to tell you,
cut her off.
you know what? This doesn't seem to me like any of what's going on is bringing us closer together or resolving anything. Sure seems like it's driving a wedge between people, because that doesn't seem like there's reconciliation in a way that is going to lead to peace. Didn't feel very peaceful to me.
That's true.
I don't think we're on the right path somehow, because this is just generating
I think
conflict.
that we need to make more effort to be able to, I think, get to an agreement with them, and also, I mean, consider what we have done in the past.
What agreement are we supposed to reach that we haven't reached already? What is it that we are supposed to do?
Well, yeah, I know. It's hard to say because, I mean, we have, I think that the government has tried to put a lot of agreement and probably put their effort into it. But, I mean, it's a pretty hard case, I think. And it's difficult to say for me to tell you exactly what would be next step, I think, to agree to something. Because I think we have done also a lot in the past to agree with them and make them feel that we have done wrong and, accept what we have to get from that. But at the same time, they're still angry. So it's a kind of a revolving door, I think. Would you agree?
I'm just tired, and I want people to stop fighting. And if you want truth, then let's get to the real truth. But if you just want money and power, and you want to use politics to get that, and you want to do it on, like, I'm just saying, you want real truth? Start digging. And we lost the call there with Dragon, but that's okay. Sorry about that, Dragon. That happens with this new system. So, I don't know. Like, I'm all for the truth, man. 100%. I want the truth. So, whatever it takes, let's get the truth. Because it's the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So, if there's ground penetrating radar, which there is, which suggests there may be graves, so be it. Let's find out what that's all about. We know that they're not mass graves because that's been debunked. So what are these graves? Who is buried there? In fact, let's bring up some of this news conference. And we'll run more of it from the beginning and just give them a voice. Let's hear what they have to say. I haven't heard all of this. Do not get me wrong. I absolutely am in favor of truth. Whatever the truth is, as long as it's truth, not just some political thing. Truth. Truth isn't going to hurt nobody. Truth will bring us to peace. Real truth. If it's not true, that's the stuff that generates anger, conflict, division, even wars. So I want the truth, the whole truth, or as much of it as we can get, and nothing but the darn truth. That's what I want. I'm all for that. They need more money to go get it, that's fine, as long as it's truth. It's got to be truth. You know what I'm saying? I don't think anybody can disagree with that. National Day of Truth and Reconciliation.
Has become essential to our ability to get the truth told. Then we were to learn this past July in a teleconference with Canada that funding was being reduced to 91 million over 2 years. During that teleconference, all mics were muted. And so we got to listen
I'm going to back that up a
who
little bit so
attended
she can introduce herself.
investigating. We have expanded the number of impacted communities from 22 that were identified by the NCTR to now 60 First Nations communities across Canada.
Back it up even.
Is to uncover, document, and share the truth about what happened at the Mohawk Institute during its 140 years of operation. What we have been able to identify in our work is the names of 5,900 children who attended the mush hole. We've been able to conduct research on about 14.5 acres of lands associated with six.
Okay, but take note, she said 5,900 plus who attended. Okay, who attended these schools, not who died there. And so, okay, let's just listen.
607 acres that we're investigating. We have expanded the number of impacted communities from 22 that were identified by the NCTR to now 60 First Nations communities across Canada and the James Bay and Hudson's Bay region. And as we continue to do our work, it has become increasingly important to us to ensure that as we do our work, that there is sustainable funding in place to ensure that the work can be completed and we can say the name of every child who attended the Mohawk Institute as part of our work to uncover those who are still missing and in unmarked burials. So I want to start with just letting you know that in 2021, Canada announced funding to support approximately 144 First Nations communities to begin the work into unmarked burials and missing children's investigations. Over the last 3 years, this funding has become essential to our ability to get the truth told. Then we were to learn this past July in a teleconference with Canada that funding was being reduced to 91 million over 2 years. During that teleconference, all mics were muted, and so we got to listen to Canada make the announcement. There was no information provided about protocols, guidelines, application processes. Up until that day, we were of an understanding that communities would have access up to $3 million per year over the next 3 years to fund investigative work across Canada. At that press conference, we were informed that ceiling would be dropped to 500,000. And after that meeting began the work. And that work was mobilizing the 147 Indigenous entities and organizations across this country who were leading this work. And to do that, we started with a rally here on July 22nd. We met with the minister on August 1st. And then on August 16th, we were informed by Canada that they were increasing the ceiling back to $3 million, but they were not changing the base level of funding. So while you could get $3 million, it was still only $47 million that was available this year. Because of that announcement, Canada essentially was informing us that communities were going to be pitted against each other to try and access a limited pool of funding that was available across the country. 2 days after that, we hosted a national unmarked burial conversation in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We brought people together from BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario, with survivors talking at their tables about what this meant for them with the impact of the cuts. And we brought the experts who have been helping us in this work to talk about, from a financial standpoint, what that would mean for the level of investigative work we'd be able to do on the ground. So as we do our work, I want to start with talking to you just a little bit about our frustrations, anger, and the devastating impact of the cuts, given that just over a year ago, the Prime Minister of this country, Canada, made a statement that said, "As communities continue searching for the children who never came home, the Government of Canada will be there every step of the way. We were going to provide them with the resources they need to fully uncover the truth of what happened at residential schools, honor the children who did not return, and support communities as they continued their healing journeys." So as we do our work, there's a contradictory there, because is that work attached to $47 million, or sorry, $45.5 million, or is that work attached to a promise to get the truth told? Because the two don't reconcile with each other. We're trying to uncover a history that's 150 years old, and the limited funding we've been provided in 3 years, it's not doable. There are hundreds of millions of dollars of work that need to be done, and that's just a start to try and cover the truth of what happened in all of these schools, 139 in fact. So as we do our work, we continue to press Canada to restore funding. We continue to press the importance of the research work that's needed, both in archival work to uncover records and documents so we can find out who the children were, and it's critically important to continue to do the work associated with archaeology so that we can ensure that as we do this work, it coincides with trying to find those children who were not brought home. It means that communities, as we do this work, have to take pause, because with no funding since April 1st of this year, many have had to shutter their doors, many of them had to stop their work, and many like us have had to reconfigure everything we're doing to try and keep our doors open and our lights on as we fight Canada for the funding we need. And so today we're releasing a report that captures the growing anger and frustration of survivors Indigenous leaders, and experts over Canada's broken promises. And we say to the Prime Minister, we've had enough. Promises only matter when you keep them, so keep your promise. Do it for the communities, do it for this country, so that they may know what real reconciliation looks like. And most importantly, do it for the survivors who lived through this nightmare and who for 60, 70, and sometimes 80 years have fought for the truth to be told about those who didn't come home. It's time for them to have to stop fighting and for Canada to step into its responsibility. So as you have in front of you, we have a list of recommendations that we are pressing Canada to implement immediately. The first is for Canada to truly work towards truth and reconciliation. And we ask that in doing that, that they give survivors access to their own records, including all 23 million documents identified but not released to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, and all RCMP records related to missing children and unmarked burials associated with the Mohawk Institute and all Indian residential schools. That Canada provide robust, stable, long-term funding for investigations into missing children and unmarked burials. That communities be able to self-determine the type of aid and required supports to lead their investigations. That Canada honor the promise of reconciliation based on truth by committing formally to a complete account of the Indian residential school experience. And that Canada ensure funding support for memorialization and public commemoration remain a central part of this work. And finally, we ask that Canada include funding support for the creation of spaces for sharing, learning, and healing. I'd like to now pass the microphone over to Roberta.
I'm Roberta Hill. I'm a Mohawk from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. I was a 6-year-old child when I went into the Mohawk Institute in 1957, and I left in 1961, but I went through the 60 scoop into foster care until 1960, I believe it was 69 when I graduated from there. But today, I remember a lot of those times at the Mohawk Institute. When I first got there, and I can say most of us kids did not know what the Institute was. I didn't even know that name, residential school. We were just there. Most kids say, why was I there? You know, so even when I moved out of there, I still didn't know what that school was. And if they were there to protect us, they certainly didn't, because this is one of the, like probably all of the residential schools, very horrific, very damaging, harmful, abusive institutions that were supposed to be institutions of care. That's what we were told, our parents were told, that we'd look after you, you'd get a good education. That's not what happened. That really wasn't, and that's not the agenda. The agenda was never to do that for us. It was to assimilate. And in order to do that, they had to take the kids away from the community, away from even the federal Indian day schools on reserve weren't doing the job that they expected. And that was to assimilate and turn us into good Christian kids. And so today, when I hear of the funding cuts and how long I have been researching and trying to get to the truth, I go through a lot of records, and they're in those archives, it tells you a story. And so when Canada says, I'm sorry, what I want to know is, what are you sorry for? You tell the rest of Canada why you're sorry, because I don't see where they're sorry at all. Because if you're going to cut funding, we're right back where we were. More lies, more promises that can be broken, you know? So I'll give you an example what's in the archives that I find when I say they never cared. I see one article of one of the documents that says there's a child from Six Nations, a Six Nations boy. He's very sick. We need to send him home. Like, why would you send this little sick child home? Why not to a hospital? So to me, that's part of this, you know, when you're investigating where the children are, what happened to them, you look at some of those things and say, they weren't there to protect us as children, or they would have done better than that. They would have made sure that we had the proper care. But because we always were Indigenous children, we have a registry number assigned to us. We're a number. We're a dollar figure to them. And the less that they have to spend on us, then the better they are. So that's the way I see it operating. But there's so many archives, so many departments that are involved in this, that it is going to take time. And to cut funding now is just absolutely ridiculous, and it just makes me angry and very frustrated over this. Because I can see in there, I see what things are happening in those archives. And so let's open it up. Let's have all of those millions that are still promised. There's millions of documents yet to come. So maybe it's a waiting game for them. They're waiting for us poor old residential school people to die. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. Not that I know of. So I said, I'll live as long as I can because I want answers and I want the truth. There is no reconciliation. Absolutely none. If you're going to lie to us and do this to us. None. Because reconciliation means that this other party will understand. They have to be a party to this and understand why we're reconciling. And I know I talk to a lot of Canadian people and they're shocked. It really bothers them that this could happen in Canada. And why didn't we know? It's because of the ugly history and what was done to children. There was a target on the backs of all Indigenous children in this country. That there was. And so that's where I am today, is like, if I'm upset, I have a darn good reason why I'm upset, because there's too many lies being told, And if they think that cutting money is saving, cutting the funding, saving money, that's a financial part. I think what people need to understand is the price we paid as children, how we were abused physically, sexually, all the rest of it, any kind of abuse, it was there. So we paid a heavy price, but here we are today, standing up still, asking to walk with us, but in honesty, in truth. And that's the only way I'm going to reconcile, is when the government can honor those commitments. And that's all I have to say.
So while Roberta and I talk a little bit about the research, media has had an inordinate focus on ground search and the work being done about ground search. What we want to say to you is both are critically important. We need the records and the documents to shape and inform what we're doing about the ground search efforts within programs across the country. So we've asked Dr. Scott Hamilton to join us today to talk a little bit about ground search efforts associated with these activities with unmarked burials of missing children.
My name's Scott Hamilton. I'm an archaeologist on faculty at Lakehead University. And I've been involved in the residential schools investigations since the time of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, when they asked me to review the records that were available at that time and try and document where the burial places were with the schools across the country. And I was immediately struck with the information void that confronted the investigations of that time, and that void continues into the present. As we've moved into the post-2021 time, when funding became available to initiate this work, it triggered a very complex process for Indigenous communities across the country. Some had to make decisions whether they were prepared to take on the heavy burden of addressing the school within their traditional territory. And if so, how to identify and reach out to communities that were affected, where those other communities' children disappeared into that particular school. How to reach consensus within that group of affected communities about what they wanted to see happen. And this takes time. It takes a great deal of time because the communities first had to think through carefully what was possible, what were the methodologies, what methodologies might work, how to mesh a number of complex methods in order to come closer to addressing the information void problem. And probably the most important sources of information reside in the heads of the survivors. Their childhood memories need to be collected, but this is quite complicated because these are very traumatic experiences, very traumatic memories that have been suppressed for a very long time. It dredges up a lot of pain and grief and anger. And one needs to have protections in place to protect those people as they are being re-traumatized by talking about their experiences. There are written documents scattered almost literally throughout Canada, probably Europe to a very large degree. And many of these records aren't accessioned. They're not part of the federal records that are currently held by the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And there are many millions of records that have been identified, but no one has looked at yet. They're not accessioned, they're not organized. So we've got this vast store of information that might be useful, might be accessible. Then there are the church records. All of this information, coupled with the memories of survivors, becomes the foundations of information about what was the nature of the operation, what was the nature of the school, how was it configured, how many children, what were their names, where did they come from, how many got to go home, how many disappeared, how many do we know died, and then there's the question of where are they buried. And much of the focus has been on that last question and the focus on technology to address that question of where are they buried. Well, we can't answer or even begin thinking about that until all of that other preliminary work is addressed. We need to identify the areas of high probability in order to focus this very complex, very expensive, and very technically demanding work of doing non-invasive investigations. And throughout this whole process, this is the need to constantly be integrating the information and evaluating the information, addressing how much we know, do gap analysis of the bits we don't still know anything about, look for contradictory information and try and track down why it's contradictory in order to narrow the search areas down as much as we can in order to be more effective in those operations. This is going to take a very long time because of the many complex confounding issues. Canada is a very large country. Schools are scattered across them. All of these schools are in different biogeographic regions, different soil conditions, different histories of redevelopment, different vegetation, different climates. All of these complexities require that each community, each investigation, develop a tailored method for conducting their investigations. This is not something that can be done hurriedly, or you end up with more troubles than you solve. And I think I'll stop there.
Okay.
So before we open it up for questions, we also want to let people know that starting today, the Secretariat and organizations across the country are beginning a social media campaign, I Stand With Survivors. And the campaign is focused on standing with survivors to ensure that Canada provides the resources needed and proceeds with action on the 5 recommendations. So as we work together, while we as a small group are here, we represent more than 125 people who attended the gathering in August, organizations across the country that are encompassing of First Nations people, Métis people, Inuit people. And so this is a national Indigenous issue that we're raising today, and the report reflects their voices. So we'd like to open up the room for questions now.
We will now go to questions. One question, one follow-up. Please identify with your name and affiliation. We'll start in the room and then go to Zoom. Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions. Une question et une suivie. On va commencer d'abord dans la salle, puis nous passerons à Zoom. Identifiez avec votre nom et affiliation, s'il vous plaît.
I'm going to stay with this because it's just such a divisive, controversial,
this question is for
volatile thing for Canada and the U.S.
Projects that must have been stopped or wouldn't be able to be started because of the cuts.
So I can give you 3 examples that we're aware of. In Ontario, I'll focus because that's where we know. I can tell you that communities like Akwesasne had their funding significantly reduced under the new funding formula. I can let you know that my understanding is Anishinaabe Nation, who was working on behalf of organizations in their area, have experienced similarly drastic cuts. Anishinaabe Nation also has had extensive cuts. For the Survivor Secretariat, under the original announcement, we would have went from 10.2 million over 3 years to 1.5 million. And the devastation of that is unimaginable. But now the fact that we would have to compete to sustain the same funding levels we have is just the beginning. And we've heard the same messaging across the country. So we encourage media sources in each region to please reach out to the entities doing the work, and they can speak specifically to their information.
Thank you. And for Mr. Hamilton, in the report, it is stated that because of the cuts, you wouldn't be able to do what are called invasive ground research. What does that mean for finding of new graves? And is it the kind of technique that was used in Kamloops, for example?
During the gathering in late August to discuss the consequences and implications, I was asked to talk about how, the standard methodologies were evolving and developing, and what was the sequence of steps and stages that were starting to coalesce and appear in many investigations across the country. And I was asked to take a look at that larger process and address what had to be thrown away, what was the most important, what had to be funded, and what had to be thrown away in order to protect those core activities. And my conclusion, as somebody who does this kind of thing, was that the critically most important thing was a combination of restoration of funding to support wellness, restoration of funding to collect information from survivors, continuation of the written archive search, and mothball all ground search, all geophysics, all investigations on sites, because it was too long-term, too expensive, and it was going to burn through whatever money the communities had. So as a process of retrenching down to hold on to core activities that must be undertaken, essentially told them to fire me because I am now superfluous. You need to focus on your core activities.
Okay. Can I just add to the Scott's feedback? The point has become moot. Canada has said there is no funding can be used for invasive ground search, and that was confirmed to me by Patrick Belay from CERNAC a week and a half ago. We asked him specifically, will you be reinstituting the abilities of communities to be self-determining around invasive ground search? And we were told no.
You're asking, so my question is for Laura, for you. You're asking for more money from the federal government. Do you have an idea of how much would be needed in order, or how do we calculate this amount?
So I think the first thing is no search like this has ever happened in Canada before. So to put a dollar figure to it is impossible. I think the reality is what we're asking for is long-term sustainable resources to ensure that the work gets done. And I think the reality is there are two ground points that I think are critically important. Ground search and geophysics are saying it's going to take at least 15 to 20 years for the technologies to catch up. Records and documents, 23 million documents still sit in the hands of the federal government. They have not been released. Those records were promised a year ago. It took us 2.5 years to get through the 10,000 documents that Canada said they had. So we need the timeline, I would say, until every record has been searched, until the technology is able to answer the questions that need to be answered. And I think the reality is it shouldn't be an initiative. This should be a sustainable part of the work of Canada's promise on the calls to action 71 to 76.
In order to, I guess, make sure it's sustainable and we have enough money every year, are you asking the government to sit with you like every year to see, okay, what's the situation for next year? Because they have a budget every year, and
so for me,
so what should be the process?
I think the process has to be, I think when we talk about education in this country and when we talk about other items, there is a budget that's assigned and the work gets done. And that's what we're saying. This work has to be a budget commitment by Canada. And I don't think I'm sitting here on the National Day of Reconciliation begging for funding from a country that announced they're cutting our funding in August, and who then, when we met with the minister on the 1st of August, said, we'll talk to you the first week of September. We shouldn't be held over a barrel in the National Month of Reconciliation begging for funding for a promise that this Prime Minister made. We should be sitting here saying, I'm proud to be part of this country because we continue to do the work that needs to be done to have the truth told. Instead, I sit here saying, as people wear orange shirts today, we're not, because reconciliation isn't happening when truth isn't being told.
Laura, I'm Olivia Stefanovic with CBC News. Something that the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, Gary Ndendisangari, told us this morning. We interviewed him. And in his view, he says that, this is what he said, that the funding for this work was never cut. He says that there was a cap on the funding, and that cap's now been removed, and that communities can now apply until November 15th for $3 million each. How do you respond to that?
So, and this is what I said to the minister himself. It's a shell game that's being played with words. Because how do you go from 216.5 million to 91 and say it's not a cut? And while people will say it was never a line item promise, what we would say is, if this wasn't going to continue, why did you wait until 9 months into the funding year to tell people that the funding level was being reduced, when just as recently as March of this year, communities were being told they could apply for up to $3 million per year for each of the next 3 years? So it is a funding cut. It's a reduction in funding. But he will say it isn't, because he was saying it was time-limited funding when it was first announced 3 years ago. 3 years we were told to get yourself off the ground, do the work that you need to do so that you're ready to apply for the next round of funding. The 2024 budget in April proposed $91 million. Our understanding was in addition to the 216.5 that was already in place. And the fact is, we thought that that was logical because we were aware that between 70 and 78 new initiatives were waiting to put an application in for funding. So we assumed at the very least funding would be maintained at the level it was for communities who had agreements, but the 91 million would support those new applications. So I think the minister uses words in a way that say one thing to the public, but say a very different thing to people who are leading these investigations. Is it truth? Is it not truth? It depends on the perspective you stand from. But for Indigenous people, it's not a truth because the funding was cut. And it's a broken promise because we had a Prime Minister who a year ago said that he was going to stand with us until this work was completed.
Talk about, Laura, how communities are fighting over a small pool of money. How do you think that can be prevented in the future? Does there need to be some sort of, another commission or something like that dedicated to this so that all communities get equal resources?
My dilemma is, when you put money into commissions, it doesn't put money into the people who need to get the work done. Survivors have a very limited timeline left. Roberta and Lonnie, Lonnie, how old are you?
87.
87. I sit with survivors who are 93. How long does it take for a commission? Somebody's got to propose it, somebody's got to approve it, then they got to appoint people. How many more survivors will die before that happens? And it's Roberta, it's Lonnie, it's people across the country, and it's people who include our own families, my mother and the remaining family I have. Commissions don't get the work done. Communities want to bring the children home. They don't know what happened to them. They want them to be brought home. And those children have rights. Even the dead and deceased have human rights. And their human rights need to be honored so that we can find out who they are and remember them to community by doing the ceremonies of grief, of loss, of condolence. And then what we need to do is we need to bring the records home so we can bring those memories back into the community's history so we can remember them by remembering them into our individual histories. That's what survivors want, and they want to see it in their lifetime. And if we keep going at the pace that's going now, it's not going to happen. And that's Canada's failure.
David Aiken from Global News. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. Roberta, I have a question for you, and maybe Laura, you might have something as well. This government's often criticized for being strong on symbols, less so on substance. That said, this is the 4th National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. As a survivor, is it making a difference, a symbol like this, on this issue, on other issues? Can you just give us your thoughts on
What do you
whether
mean,
this
this
day
symbol? What do you mean?
Well, it's as a symbol in the sense that it's a day where we're all reflecting on, acknowledging. When I say we, I'm a non-Indigenous person, so I'm here to learn and understand. So does that help as a survivor that we have this day, that the government did this? Is that a useful thing in your view?
Yeah, I always think that's useful, you know, and that's what I keep hoping for, is that we can all work together. We're never going to heal unless we can understand what happened. And that's part of that reconciliation. You need to learn to, like, walk together, learn together, and we have to come to peace with this. And so these gatherings help, because more and more people are beginning to understand what residential schools were all about. And so when they're learning, that's Canada, like Canada's population is learning. We're always going to have the naysayers who say it never happened. You know, maybe one day they'll understand the truth. But I think as long as we're speaking the truth, that we can get to some kind of reconciliation. It's going to take a long time, probably, you know, and when I have, my hope is that it will be done in my lifetime, but if not, it's going to be my grandchildren, my grandchildren's time, and it shouldn't have to take that long. And so I think the more we can work together, the quicker we're going to go through this and resolve these issues. You know, the past is the past. We can't undo it. But I want people to understand that the horrific conditions that children were put in order for the government to move forward in whatever agenda they had. So I welcome them. Bring the Prime Minister out here. You know, that would be good. You know, that's a good step. You know, all the politicians and people like, one of the things that I see in the records, Indian Affairs was a big part of our life, that department. So Indian Affairs, we always knew about Indian Affairs. We always knew about the RCMP, why the RCMP are picking up children when they're criminal, you know, they're in charge of criminal activities. We weren't criminals. But you see, it's all these other agencies. There's tons of other agencies that had some kind of hand in how we got there. But who was there to protect us? And so I want Canada to understand that we didn't do this alone, but that doesn't mean that we can't heal together. Because I think Canada's hurting too. It puts a dark image on Canada having this history. That's not good. Not good for Canada. So yeah, I think we'll get there if we keep gathering and doing what we're doing today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amy from the Canadian Press. My question is for you, Roberta. NDP MP Leah Gazan introduced in the House of Commons last week a bill that seeks to criminalize residential school denialism. It's a private member's bill, so it has a very small chance of actually becoming law, but do you think that all of the parties should support it?
Absolutely. Like, for people, when I think of denialism, what are you denying? You know? What are they? They need to come forward and say, oh, I don't believe in residential schools because of these reasons. Anybody can say never happened, but why are you saying it? So I'd like them to come forward face to face with us survivors who went through all this. We'll tell you, it's a reality. It was a reality for all of us. So denialism, it's alive. It probably always will be, but I think it's a good step forward. I really do.
And my next question is for Dr. Hamilton.
Can I just add
yes.
response if it's possible? The other thing I want to add is the funding reductions, as significant as they are, doesn't get the truth out, which in fact advances the denialist argument. Because the argument will become, you see, There was no truth to what they were saying. That's why they've cut the funding. So then the question is, if we have a private member's bill, I would hope Canada would see that as the reason to say we need to reestablish the funding, because not to puts this government in the very stead of saying it's part of a denialist framework.
That kind of leads into my next question for Dr. Hamilton. As the grounds are searched and records are coming to light, and as more stories are coming out, what do you think, or what do you hope the average Canadian keeps in mind as they're hearing all of these stories?
An important part of what Robbie spoke about was the need for all of Canada to unflinchingly face our grim history. And an important part of that is acknowledging harm, acknowledging wrong. If we choose to gloss over, if we choose to ignore, if we continue to live in a never land, that these terrible things didn't happen, or they might not have been as bad as what was said, we're kind of choosing to close our eyes and hum a song so we don't have to bear witness to what happened, to confront the fact that terrible things were done in the name of our nation. And an important part of Canadian legacy is to grapple with those dark, painful facts and try and heal from them, try and seek reconciliation. But one doesn't get reconciliation without acknowledgement of those painful truths.
Fraser Neum from AP10 News. I'm curious about this meeting that I assume you could apply for fund. It was never a line item in the budget, so it wasn't. We didn't know about it in the budget for sure. And I'm really curious about how the lead up to this meeting and when it was and how it all came about that you were informed that you would be dealing with reduced funding.
So it's interesting. So starting in January, February, community started asking across the country what's going on with the funding, because we weren't hearing anything. And we were told a $3 million ceiling. Then we went into what was called radio silence. Not one agreements officer in the country was responding to emails or phone calls around the status of their applications. That continued until, probably for most, until July when the meeting happened. We were fortunate because we came here and met with the Regional Director General in April to push back against that rumored $3 million cap. So we at least had met with them, and the announcement we got is we can't say anything because the budget's coming down in April. When the budget came down in April, we started the phone calls again, not just the Secretariat organizations across the country. Nobody returned our calls, no return to our emails. I received a call on the day before the July meeting with all entities. So I got a phone call from Canada asking to meet, where I was informed that the ceiling was going to be $500,000. That in fact it wasn't a $216.5 million budget, it was a $91 million budget. So when we met, it was a 30-minute meeting. We and one other entity were contacted for those conversations, and no guidelines, no protocols, nothing. So that afternoon we were already working with a media outlet on another article about the issues around the funding. So we called them and let them know what the decision was, that Canada was reducing the funding significantly. That outlet released that information that evening, and it must have hit Canada first thing the next morning, because at 9 o'clock on the Thursday morning, Canada sent a mass email to every entity in the country for a 1 p.m. meeting for 30 minutes. At the time of that, we logged into the Zoom. All of our mics were muted. They gave us the message. If we had questions, they could only be asked in the chat. And at the conclusion, we were told this is it, $500,000. The application process would be going up soon, the new guidelines would be going up soon, and they ended the call. Like, there was no preparatory information. There was no emails from agreements officers across the country. It was, you know, as they say, a command performance. Show up for the Zoom, and we did, and that's what we got. And after the 30 minutes, they said that our agreements officers would be in touch with us in the upcoming weeks, that the funding portal would be open until November, and they expected the funding would flow in the early new year, which meant we would be looking at a full 3/4 of the financial year being passed before we would see $1 for the missing children and unmarked burials activities that are happening across the country. And still today, that's still true. The funding portal doesn't close until November. And here's the funny thing. The funding portal for this year closes in November. The funding portal for next year closes in October. So I will put an application in for next year before I've even heard a decision on this year's funding. And that's for everybody across the country. And communication since then has been sparse. We have been writing the critics, we've been writing the minister's office, we've written to the prime minister, and we've been doing it with the support of organizations across the country. And that gathering report you have, that report and that gathering happened in a 2-month window. That's how fast we've moved as organizations across the country. In 4 weeks, we organized the event, and in another 4 weeks, we completed a report. And that's how fast we've acted, in lieu of the fact that we have not seen a decision or an announcement from Canada.
Now, the other question I had is the government hired the International Commission on Missing Persons. There was quite a bit of fanfare about that they were going to meet with communities and they had expertise in this area. I understand that contract has not been renewed. And also, of course, there's special interlocutor, Kimberly Murray as well. Have you had any meetings with either, or has any of this been helpful in terms of communications?
I think it's all been helpful in communications. I think the ICMP report spoke clearly about sustainability of the work, that work needs to be done, and sustainable resources that need to be done. Special Interlocutor's interim report and her report that's going to be released at the end of this month have said similarly. She's spoken to media about the impacts of this cut and what it does for broken promises to survivors. In addition to that, the Senate released its report on missing children, missing records, and their document similarly says that there needs to be sustainable funding. But just recently, the UN resolution on the rights of the dead. Dr. Bev Jacobs, if you want to talk a little bit about that report.
Sure. Well, there's two UN special rapporteurs that have done studies on the rights of the dead, and that it is an obligation by the state to provide the resources in order to recognize the rights and the issues that we're dealing with specifically in identification and memorials.
Another question, if possible. Sorry.
Sorry, maybe just one for Laura. You mentioned, this reducing of funding is putting communities against each other. Do we see that right now, or is this something we're expecting when they're asking for money and all this?
So it's interesting. We're not seeing it right now. And there's this beautiful phrase that Eric Large from Alberta created. He was with the Survivor Secretariat last year in an event. And he said, I like being in 6 nations, but we're creating a new nation. It's called the Survivor Nation. And I think the one thing that is very different around the issues playing out right now is that all of us who are leading organizations doing this work are united. We're not going to take funding if we're going to put another community at a disadvantage, because this is about our survivors. This is about our family members. This is about our communities and healing. So that's why we've created the report, is that Canada needs to make sure that the resources accessed are equitable. This is not political. This is nothing more than survivors deserve the truth in their lifetimes. And we're, as organizations, working very hard to try and apply pressure so that we don't allow ourselves to be pulled into taking the burden of what Canada refuses to do, and that is get the work done and get it done in the way it needs to be done.
Sorry, one more question. You're all standing up here saying that this is important. It needs to be, like, records need to be searched, grounds need to be searched. In 2021, after Kamloops, there was an incredible amount of media attention. There was outcry from the Canadian public that this was a horrible stain on the legacy of Canada. Do you feel that because that attention and the outcry from Canadians has somewhat died down, that the government is following suit with like the priorities of the Canadian public? Like, what is the responsibility for Canadians to support you?
So I use the phrase all people in Canada because not everybody in this country is a Canadian. So I think all people in Canada have a responsibility. And what I often say to people is you have a responsibility because no matter where you were born and no matter where you came from, if somebody came to your house one day and took your children, they physically abused them, they conducted experiments on them, they sexually abused them, they conducted malnutrition examples on them. Do you think the country would owe you the truth of what happened because your child never came home? I think it's unfair to say that Indigenous people are only a priority when the spectacle of media is cast our way. The fact is, Indigenous people welcomed every nation to this country. We are the original peoples. We welcomed settlers, we helped them survive, and over time the relationship shifted and we lost so much. And what has happened through the Indian residential school system was the stripping away of our humanity and stripping away of our personhood. And it isn't about the loss of Canada paying attention to us, it's the fact that Canada's using that moment to quietly shift the ground politically against us. And the problem is that nobody will say in the room, Canada and the religious orders operated these entities, these Indian residential schools. Why should we have to beg money from the very entities that conducted this atrocity? They should be paying this as part of their commitment to reconciliation. And I think that's the critical part. It isn't about because Canadians didn't show up. I don't expect Canadians to show up and people in Canada to show up every day because they don't know this history. And the announcement in 2021 broke our hearts. I sat in the house with my mom who heard that announcement, and I watched the trauma on her face, and I watched it reignited. Unless it's part of your family history, it's just another sad story. But when it's your family's history, it's a battle cry. And that's what survivors are doing. They're the warriors in this. They've been warriors in this their entire lives. And it's time for Canada to say, rest. Let us take on the burden of responsibility because it is our burden. And that's our burden of reconciliation.
Any more questions?
Okay. Okay. Something doesn't feel right. Yeah. I'll be right back.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Nights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right. What else was I going to talk about tonight? This whole thing with the residential schools, like I say, I just, I don't know. Something just doesn't feel right about it. I'll tell you that. Don't know what else to say. And we have to be very careful of what we say, right? Because if that private members bill passes, criminalizing speech that would be considered residential school denialism, you could go to jail. So you dare not challenge it. I'm all for the truth. I don't know that I'm in favor of laws, though, that criminalize what people think or even what they say, even if it's not true. I don't know. There's a line, though, that I think needs to be drawn, because you also don't want people engaging in lies designed to do harm to individuals, to groups of people, or even to the whole country. We're having a tough time, folks, navigating these new times, this new digital age, this time of war. And I would say there is a connection between what we just witnessed at that news conference in Ottawa and what's going on in the streets, the protests, what's going on in Gaza, even what's going on in Ukraine, and what's going on our campuses, in our educational institutions. Dragon touched on it when he called in. There's a revolution underway. That news conference was definitely part of it. Politics. It isn't just about truth. It's about politics, too. It's about money. It's about power. I suppose it's about truth. Politics is playing a big part in this. Maybe that's why it doesn't feel right. It should really be about truth. And the archaeologist was quite right. This is going to take a long time if this is what we need to do to get to some sort of reconciliation. I don't know what your thoughts are, but when I hear they just want sustainable funding, that means indefinite. Just like forever. They can't quantify this or define it or tell us, these experts can't tell us how much money it would take over how many years to do whatever kind of research, excuse me, needs to be done. I find that hard to believe. I really do. I don't know why. You have sites, you should be able to at least get some sort of a ballpark. I don't know. I'll be right back.
He's a fighter. He's a survivor. President Trump, defiant, strong. He is determined to make America great again. Pay tribute to the 45th President of the United States with this collectible t-shirt from the Maverick News Memorable Moments collection. Even a would-be assassin's bullet could not stop him. Instead, he emerged with his fist in the air ready to fight for freedom. Get your Trump Fighting for Freedom t-shirt with any donation of $30 or more to Maverick News. There are 2 iconic artistic designs to choose from, but there is only one way to get these. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Support free speech, free media. Support Maverick News. Call 1-866-248-1490 or order online at supergeeks.tv.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, we're back, and John Scotty Rimby from out in Alberta is on the line with us. He just called in. How are you tonight, Sir John?
I'm very well, thank you. How is our Maverick News family worldwide? We've cooled off in Alberta. We're in a cold streak, but all good.
Oh, yeah. You know, John, I noticed even about 3 weeks ago, the leaves around here in southern Ontario began to change. And that tells me we are in for a cold winter, my friend. Yeah. And the leaves have actually started to fall off the trees now, and we're not even into October yet. Normally, around here, we're probably a good couple of weeks ahead of schedule, I would say. So, not looking forward to the winter.
Well, here too, Rick, we got the leaves are all off the trees. You know, we had a cool, wet spring. The crops are about 3 weeks behind. There's a good, solid month of combine and canola to do. So, hopefully we're going to get our Indian summer back here in Alberta. Hopefully. Our farmers need it. Our farmers need a good harvest.
Yeah. Man, so I guess my mic was hot. I hope I wasn't having my coughing fit. Well, my mic was hot. That's why I went to the break. If I was coughing into the microphone, folks, I apologize. Oh, it sounds like the cops are coming to get you or take you to the...
I'm downtown in Calgary. Well, I don't know how to feel about today, Rick, to be really honest with you. I've talked before on the show, my family has a very, very special relationship with our Indigenous people out of Alberta. You know, my mom was a tuberculosis nurse for 37 years, and in the 50s, she traveled around, rurally to the different, reservations and administered her wonderful mothering and nursing. And, a lot of her patients made her jewelry in the 50s and 60s. It was very special, Rick, to get that from an Indigenous person. And further to that, my grandfather, out of Rimby, he taught in one-room schools in Peace River country, Blind Man Valley, Monte Vista in the 30s and 40s. And I got to tell you, Rick, there was never any talk in our house of these indigenous schools, what was going on. And Hobbema is not that far from Rimbey. It's maybe 20 minutes. And I just wonder, when is enough enough? When can we work together and start healing these wounds and move on together as Canadians? Am I out of line feeling that way? Because I don't know how to feel today, Rick.
This is a big problem all the way across the board because, as I said, I'm not sure I like the way this process is playing out because it feels like, and I think you're seeing it today, a wedge is being driven in between people. Instead of reconciling, we're dividing more. So I don't have an answer sitting here tonight, but it doesn't feel right. It feels weird and wrong. It feels like we're heading toward more confrontation. This doesn't feel right at all. It's bad. This is really, really bad. And I don't want to be taken the wrong way. Like I say, I'm all for truth. But what it is too, is there's a lot of propaganda, I think, surrounding all of this. Because we saw, I think it was Jagmeet Singh of the NDP who came out right off the hop 3 years ago when this story broke. Nothing really new there. It was just regurgitated information, if you know your history. This was nothing new, but they brought it back up 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago, right before the election? Yeah, I guess it'd be about 3 years ago, right? So the thing is, it's like the way it was portrayed at that time. It was Jagmeet Singh of the NDP who started talking about mass graves. Mass graves. That suggests that there was like a slaughter of like a physical murderous genocide that took place, and corpses were dumped into like ditches, they just dug a pit or something behind these schools and just threw bodies in there. And there's no evidence of that. None. That's what kind of sticks in my craw, right? And then since then we've seen, I think walk back from that. But you have this ground penetrating radar, which is identifying what appear to be grave sites, but even some of that stuff has been shown to be incorrect, and other stuff is inconclusive because ground penetrating radar is not conclusive at all. You really need to, exhume at least sample sites to begin to understand what's really under the ground. Ground penetrating radar just gives you an indication, an inkling. So it's I don't know, John. It's I've covered stories in the past. I've been out. I've talked to archaeologists who use ground penetrating radar, and it's never conclusive. There was a site here not very far from where I sit, where ground penetrating radar seemed to indicate there was possibly a First Nations burial ground not very far from here. But then in the end, after they did actually excavate or exhume, and there wasn't anything there. Nothing as extensive, like they didn't know. It looked like there could be a burial ground there. So they found like some arrowheads and some other things, but in the end, it was years ago. I don't remember all the details, but in the end, there wasn't a grave site there, but there was a lot of talk about it, a lot of commotion, and they got some government money and they did the work and they did the actual ground excavation. But I found it interesting to hear her say, that lady, that the government said that none of the money earmarked for this is to be used for how did she phrase it? Invasive ground search, which means they're not going to dig. Even though they're getting all that money, the one thing that would give us at least get us closer to that truth, the one thing conclusively that would say, yes, these are great, at least graves, real graves, is not being done, or it won't be done with the money. Why? I don't.
But you know, Rick, am I off base by that end of the news conference I caught? There's such a negative rip apart, tear everything apart tone to it. Let's not forget, Mavericks in Canada and the United States. The Pope was in Alberta a couple of years ago here, specifically in Hobbema, for exactly what we're talking about tonight. And although the Catholic Church is far from perfect, I think an I'm sorry goes a long way. And there were millions of dollars spent on that papal visit that was organized in 4 months.
Yes.
And I mean, I got to tell you, my grandfather was probably one of the most incredible human being teachers you could ever meet. And he taught, school in the 30s and 40s. And there was never any talk of that in our farmhouse in the area. And he was the sort of man, if he'd had any inkling this is going on, he would have been up to Helene and intervening in that. And it was just, and the other thing too, Rick, if we flip the record here, I've run into some Indigenous in Alberta, and they tell a very different story, Rick, that they had a positive experience through the Catholics within education and going home for
There are
summers.
some people do convey that type of story. That's true.
And I'm not trying to take anything at all. Please don't mess my words up. I'm not trying to take anything at all from our Indigenous people in Canada that had a negative experience. But in fairness and fair ball, there are other Native Indigenous across Canada that had a very positive experience that are now working in our oil industries in Western Canada, lumber, chemicals, farming, across Canada. And you can probably take that into Quebec and Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. There are some other stories out there that are very, very positive, but they seem to get buried under the negative media, Rick. Am I off base saying that?
Not entirely, no. I know that there are people out there who, went to residential schools and did have what they would say are positive experiences. We've heard from people like that, so that's true. And then other people had bad experiences. But you know what? The other thing, and I did not attend a residential school, nor did I attend a Catholic school at any time. So my experience was obviously different as a child. But I do know that there were a lot of abuses in other schools that were not residential schools. It was the times. There was corporal punishment. You had kids getting the strap, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. That was the attitude back then. So it wasn't uncommon, even in, other public schools in Canada, for kids to be beaten. Fingers wrapped with a ruler, That's physical abuse. That's the kind of stuff that took place back then. And I'm sure that there was a lot of sexual abuse too that was taking place that was probably swept under the carpet, that people didn't hear about, that today I think there's more reporting of it, but probably a lot less back then, all across the board. And it was a different time medically as well. The one, I can't remember their names now, but the one lady made reference to one of the children of the time becoming ill, and there was a notation in the record saying that they had to be sent home. She took issue with that. What were the circumstances surrounding that? Why weren't they sent to a hospital? It wasn't like, I don't know what the date was on that, what year that was, what reference that is made to in terms of the timeline, but you go back into the 1800s, they didn't have cars or motorized ambulances. They had courses. So it wasn't a matter of like call 911 and an ambulance shows up at the front door and they take you to a hospital and give you penicillin, which didn't exist at the time. All right, and John, it sounds like you're breathing heavily into the microphone or something, and some people are making comments about it. Can you hear me?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I can. Yeah. Just on a side note, like, am I off base, Rick, in saying when is enough enough? When are we going to turn the page and move forward? And is this more politically drawn? Where is Turtle Island behind this? How much more money is going to be laid out? And that's the political sort of twist on it. I mean, I'm not Catholic, but I do give the Pope a lot of kudos for coming and doing that reconciliation apology 2 years ago. I think we need to move forward in a positive way. Is the world not in a big enough mess? We've got wars on two fronts, and now we've got this ongoing. It's like the wounds are never ever going to be healed, Rick, with this Indigenous school
Well,
issue.
then, yeah, and then they sat there and talked tonight about we have it's impossible to know how much this is going to cost. I don't buy that. I don't think that's probably not true. And to then say that they just want sustainable funding, that sets off alarm bells for me, right? It's like, I don't know, is it going to take 20 years, 30 years, a decade, 2 decades? I don't know. But somebody should be able to quantify this thing and give us at least some sort of a ballpark. Then you can lay out a plan, you can get the funding in place, you can give people what they need to do the job, and go get it done, and go get us the truth. Whatever that is. It seems to me, though, they've already, in some respects, they've already reached a conclusion. They already think they have their truth. So that's what's being conveyed. And if they already have what they think is the truth, to the degree where they're ready to pass legislation to throw people in jail if they deny whatever that truth is supposed to be without actually doing the proper investigation, which they say is going to take so long that they can't quantify it or tell you how much it's going to cost, or even how many years or decades it might take. So they're going to start throwing people in jail if they say the wrong thing based on what might not even be the truth. So what's the truth? Like, how can that doesn't jive? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't mean to, and I don't mean that in an instance. I want the truth. I want the truth, as whatever that truth is, and whatever it is that we're looking for here. Is it bodies in a mass grave? Then let's go get it. Let's go get the evidence. Is it just documentation of abuses of children? Was it murders of children? Was it children dying from disease because they weren't cared for properly? Allegations there of experimentation conducted on children. Is that true? Then let's get the truth. Whatever it is, I'm up for it. I can take it. We need it so that we can actually get reconciliation and then come together, heal as nations, so that their nations within our nation can heal, and we as a nation can heal. Because it isn't all coming together as Canadians. It's about Canada coming together with the First Nations. That's what's needed. Anything less is not gonna get us anywhere. So if that's what needs to happen, then let's just figure out how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, lay out a plan, go get the job done, and then let's deal with it.
But it's the direction they are pushing this is, let's have an open, bottomless checkbook from the Canadian taxpayer. Yeah. And enough is never enough.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling that I'm getting, is there's a lot more political push behind this. And I think whether you like Justin Trudeau or not, I think there have been some big efforts made the last number of years of land claims and settlements. And is that not factored in as well to this? It
Oh my
doesn't seem
goodness,
to
there
be
was
with their
just
news conference.
there was just this court decision a month ago for the First Nations communities up in I think sort of central northern Ontario. I'd have to go back and review the information. Worth like it could be $100 billion because of land and resource claims up there. That was I believe a top court decision. So I don't remember all the details. We ran it here on the program. I made reference to it. So and they're rewriting a lot of these treaties across the country. I know that I think they're up to, don't quote me again, just memory off the top of my head, 23 already rewritten in the past year. So all kinds of efforts are being made. Then we have UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, being integrated into our system. It is now part of Canadian law. That's changing everything as well. So there's a lot that's being done. This is just one more thing. And it's just massive amounts of money being thrown at all of this reconciliation. This isn't the only level of it. And I don't think it's unrealistic or insensitive to say, what's it going to cost? And then work toward that. Frankly, I don't care what it costs. If it's 200, 300 million, if it's $1 billion, whatever it takes, okay? But let's be realistic about it and go do whatever it takes to get this done. But I don't know. See, the thing is, I think that there are people on both sides that would prefer to just not deal with it, because I think there is politics involved, and other issues as well that maybe don't serve the people. That I guess that's why it doesn't feel right. Something's amiss here. I don't like it when people stand up and say, well, there's no way to know how much it's going to cost. You're just going to have to give us money every single year indefinitely. Hundreds of millions of dollars every year until forever. No, I don't think so. No, that's not coming together. That's not going to solve things. That will make things worse. That's why the path we're on here is it'll create resentment, friction, more animosity, more prejudice, more conflict. We can't have that. We have too much of it already. This is not the answer. Not this method of dealing with it. You need clearer goals, clearer guidelines, clearer budgets. This is what we need, not ambiguity and perpetual payments. Without actually getting us any damn answers, because she just told us, and there will be no ground excavation. Okay, so a lot of research with no actual conclusions, just murky allegations of mass graves and mass murderous genocide, which we already know they've walked that back because it's just demonstrably at this point not provable on that level. Now you want to talk about cultural genocide? Okay, we can have that discussion.
They just seem, Rick, when you keep picking away at the wound or the cut or the problem and picking away at it, it never has a chance to heal up and become healthy and move forward.
Yeah.
And it just seems like even some of these land settlement new deals they've done, they get a deal done, and then after they cash the check, they come back for more. They're never happy. They seem to be a big part of the Indigenous in Canada. I don't think there's some of them, you could give them any amount of money, and you know what? They're just never going to be satisfied. There's an element there's a definite element there, I believe, part of this, and I think some of it is politically driven behind the scenes.
Yeah, I want to be able to live in harmony with everybody, so that's what I would like. But I'm not into, feather bedding some perpetual government funded thing that doesn't really resolve.
I can tell you from personal experience, being in the oil business in Alberta, there are some very wealthy Indian bands in Alberta. Ochi be one of them, Western Rocky, Samson and Ermineskin, part of Hobima, and they don't all share that wealth with one another, Rick.
Yeah.
They certainly do not. You drive into Hobima where the Pope was, and the one side is filthy oil rich with Samson and Ermineskin, and the other side with Mohawk, Montana, has nothing. They don't always share the wealth with one another. And look, we're praying for peace around the world. Well, we need a big shot at peace in Canada with our indigenous peoples and Canadians.
Yeah. And there are serious issues, murdered and missing indigenous women. You had those murder victims in the landfill out west, and just horrific stories, right? So these things do deserve attention, and we've got serious issues. So let's deal with them in a serious way, right? And what we're getting here, I think, is push-pull between two political sides. I think that's kind of partly what was on display at that news conference. And you've got the government on one side. I think she's kind of right in that they're making these grandiose promises, but I think that's politics too, for optics, especially going into an election year or whatever. But the government makes these promises. They look like they're being sensitive and politically correct and progressive by saying, "Oh, we're gonna, earmark $290 million or whatever," and then when push comes to shove, when it comes right down to it, yeah, they probably did cut the budget, or they did cap something, or it never was real to begin with, or it's just it was portrayed in such a way that the money's really there, but it's over a longer period of time or something. That's the way the government kind of plays, on everything. So I get that. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, but we need sustainability in our funding indefinitely. Well, now you're getting it on the other side. So politics. We need to start doing things that help the people.
Well, and Rick, how much longer is the Canadian taxpayer going to be held in one way, allegedly,
forever
ransom on this?
Forever.
Ransom on this because the federal government has been at the table, like Trudeau or not, moving forward, and it's just we need to come together as Canadians across this country with our Indigenous people and turn the page and move forward on healing. That's what today was supposed to be all about. And then to watch the end of our news conference, it just gave me such a sick feeling in my gut of more division and ripping and tearing all the progress we have made. It's like rip it and tear it apart and open the wound up again, and let's continue on.
I think that if you talk to pretty much any Canadian, right, and I'm talking about not First Nations Canadian, whatever, colonialist settlers, which I just, you know what I'm getting at. However you want to describe them, people want this resolved. Everybody wants to be able to pretty much live together, but then you start throwing money around like that, and that's a lot of money.
And it just again seems, enough isn't enough. It's just more, and you can't heal and move forward and change change the page on the book without both sides coming together with a sincere, honest heart of moving forward with healing and reconciliation. So, anyways.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Oh, this Hurricane Helene story, too. I was going to touch on that tonight. I'll just say that I've been seeing posts, and we don't have a lot of time left here, so I'm not going to drag this on too much longer, but I'll just say this. I've been seeing posts with, and it's an election year, so some suggestions that the government isn't giving any aid at all to the victims of Hurricane Helene. But then I'm looking at the news conferences where they're talking about the aid that's being given to the victims and how they're providing low-cost loans or to homeowners who've had their homes lost or damaged. If they didn't have insurance, they have relief coming from FEMA, and they're still ramping up efforts, and there will be more aid to come as well. And so I know there are government websites where people can go tonight to apply for aid, to seek aid. So there's a lot being done to help people in the United States who have been affected by this devastating hurricane. Saw the same thing with was it Hurricane Katrina when Bush was in office, and the New Orleans where they had the flooding.
Right.
And then it was like, Bush isn't doing anything at all. He doesn't care about the people. No, he was sending aid. He did. But politically, people, they exaggerate things. I don't know. I'm not saying it's enough. I think there probably needs to be a lot more done, especially after I've seen some of the footage. In fact, here I will, John, if you'll indulge me for a moment.
Yeah.
I will show a little bit of what the storm footage looked like, because it's wickedly bad. Some of what's been shown here. Let me move this over here so I can share it with everybody. Here we go. And I'm sure that by this point, a lot of people have seen a lot of the storm, but look at this. Just incredible storm it was. Incredible winds, massive amounts of water across this highway. I've got some I've got some flooding footage here too that I can share with people. Terrible stuff here, I'll show you. Here, let me get rid of this audio. Okay. Here we go.
Well, you know, Rick, we certainly pray
What's that
for
go,
the
bro?
sisters in the United States of America down there in Florida that have been devastated by this, and we send our prayers and good thoughts and wishes to our fellow brothers and sisters in Florida and all over the United States.
Yeah, I don't know if... Yeah, those last images were not from Hurricane Helene, so I apologize. That was from a totally different country. It just, it came up in the feed. And, I have to be cautious here, too, because, as much as this stuff all looks authentic to me, like, with so much fake crap out there these days, I caution everything you see now. I have to say, I've not been able to independently verify the authenticity of any of this video. It looks like it's real, and that's about all I can say about it.
Oh, I hope not.
Look at that.
Oh, we're gonna
This
go
is
up in
down
the
in
app. We
Tennessee.
have to, guys. We came quick. Love y'all.
Holy smokes, look at that. Can you see that, John?
No, I'm on my phone.
Yeah. Just like water right up to the roof of the houses. Roofs of the houses.
Yeah, and just when you think you're having a bad day, Ricky, there's always one of our fellow friends having one a little worse than us. That's why we gotta pray for everybody. Give them our good wishes.
Yeah.
Power in the prayer, Rick. Never underestimate power in the prayer.
Yes, indeed. Well. Any other thoughts tonight, John?
No,
as
you know, just best wishes to our Canadian Indigenous people across Canada wide, from Western Canada through Central and down East, and our good wishes to our brothers and sisters in the United States and Florida and people that have been hit and devastated. So always a privilege, sir, to be on your platform. And thank you, Rick. You don't get enough thank yous for doing what you do, your dedication and delivering real news to people. The shows are not always to do, but they're on topic and they're based in truth.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for everything you do too, sir.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I was contacted by those ladies just before we came on the air, like literally 5 minutes.
Save the park.
Yeah, 5 minutes before airtime. So we have a special story coming up with those ladies that you sent over here, probably within the next day or two. So stay tuned for that, folks. John has a special story he's going to share with us. Out of what city are we in? Calgary?
Calgary, down in old famous Bowness. Oh, you're gonna love them. Maverick's gonna love them.
Yeah, don't give the story away. Don't give the story away. Don't spoiler.
It's
not
like
alert.
Thelma and Louise Spitfires, fighting for
Their community.
fighting for the little guy, David and Goliath.
Yeah, there you go. So that's coming up later this week. All right, John. Thank you, sir. You have a great evening.
Cheers.
Take
God
care.
bless you. Bye.
Okay, and you can support the program if you are so inclined, and we really could use the help. End of the month, and bills to pay. And yeah, we actually really could use the help this month a little bit. Yeah. So you can do that by donating at. Where's my banner? I need the banner. There we go. Too many of them up here. I got to trim some of these out. Okay. You can donate at maverickdonations.com. That's the Give, Send, Go. Or you can also donate at freedomreporters.com. $30 or more, I will send you a t-shirt. Tell me which one you want. Maverick News, one of the Trump Fighting for Freedom t-shirts, or just the Trump Fight shirt with the image of him after he was shot with his fist in the air, or an Exile the Knights of Malta t-shirt. Send you one of those. We also have hoodies. $60 or more. 60, 65, 60. $60. It'll be 60 tonight because that's what I said. And I'll send you a hoodie as a thank you for any donation. Polo shirts, like golf shirts with embroidered logos, $45 or more. And what else do we have? That's pretty much it. I think we've got some long sleeve tees as well. Don't remember what they're worth, but if you want one, email me, I guess, and I'll tell you what we need to do about that. Anyway, we've got stuff that we can send as compensation. Plus, anybody that donates tonight, $10 or more, and I'll send you the Free Dog album, all 10 songs, inspirational tunes to build pride and optimism Pride in your nation. Pride in Canada. Be proud of your country. Be happy, and in the U.S. too. We've got some U.S.-focused songs of inspiration as well. All of them, though, about freedom on every level, including the tune Free Dog, which I should share that with you again tonight as we prepare to close out the program. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out here with me. I will be back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Maverick News Channel. I'm going to leave you with Free Dog, $10 or more. Or if you if you donate more and get a t-shirt or a hoodie or a golf shirt, polo shirt, I'll send you the whole Free Dog album. And it's pretty awesome. Especially the Free Dog song. I love that. And Cosmo says hi. I'll see you guys tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
So bright, he was singing a tune. A lonesome dog's cry about freedom and running and touching the sky. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmos free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog. He's a free dog. He's a free dog. Cosmos got them paws that just itch to roam. He's chasing his dreams. He's far from home with a heart full of the spirit so free, he's living his life, wild and carefree. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmos free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a blur. Cosmos on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmos free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. So if you're feeling lost, just think of Cosmos run. Remember his spirit, his freedom, his fun. And maybe one day when you're feeling low, you'll find your own freedom and let your spirit go. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmos free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. A tail that wags like it's never heard of a blur. Cosmos on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur. A tail that wags like it's never heard of a blur. Cosmos on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. Now the night's getting old and the sky's turning gray, but Cosmos still out there, he's miles away. He's not looking back, he's got his path to tread. With Maverick the fields, breaking all the legs. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmos free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.